Good evening. City of Opa-locka Planning and Zoning Meeting for June 4, 2024 is hereby called to order. Can we get the roll call?
Good evening. Board Member Barnes. Board Member Hibbert Smith.
Present.
Board Member Dominguez.
Here.
Board Member Megan. Board Member Mata.
Present.
Chairman Guerrero.
Here.
Attendance confirmed.
We can please stand for the invocation. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be at this meeting tonight, and we ask that you guide us in making the best decisions that we can for our city. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty. Can we get a motion for the approval of the minutes of May 7?
Move it. Claudian seconds.
Board Member Hibbert Smith.
Yes.
Board Member Dominguez.
Yes.
Board Member Mata.
Yes.
Chairman Guerrero.
Yes.
Minutes approved.
If we can get item number 1 read.
A resolution of the City Commission of the City of Opa-locka, Florida, providing approval of the conditional use request to operate an indoor shooting range or armory on the property located at 13449 Northwest 42nd Avenue and identified by folio 08-2129-016-0010 in the Liberal Industrial I3 zoning district and within the corridor mixed use overlay, providing for severability, providing for an effective date.
Thank you.
Members of the board, Chairman Gregory Gay. You may recall about a month ago, we did have an item relating to this, which was dealing with an amendment to the zoning code itself. That item is proceeding forward through the City Commission. It has gone before first reading, and it will be continuing on and hopefully to be approved. This is a companion item, basically speaking to the conditions for this particular project. To speak a little bit more specifically about it, we do have the applicants here, and they're here and available to either make a presentation or answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gay.
Hello? Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. My name is Tracy Slavens. My address is 3800 Northeast First Avenue, Suite 200, Miami, Florida. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, the Armory One LLC, and we're here tonight, as Mr. Gay said, to seek your recommendation of approval for conditional use to allow a private indoor shooting range that will be located at 13449 Northwest 42nd Avenue, which is the location where the Opa-locka Flea Market is. We have a staff recommendation of approval, and we're joined here this evening by a couple of members of the Armory team. We have Eric Greenwald and Kaj Larson. Kaj is a former Navy SEAL, and he's the current commander of the Southern Region of Florida State Guard. We're also here with our project attorney, Mark Scavuzzo, and my colleague, Lizbeth Bueno. So any questions you have, the whole team is here to answer them for you. As Mr. Gay also said, on May 7th, this board unanimously approved the text amendment to allow for this use as a conditional use under the I3 district. And we're pleased to be here tonight to ask for your consideration on this site-specific project for the use. Can we go to the next slide, please? We've created a definition for the indoor shooting range, which will apply throughout the I3 district. But one of the interesting and I think important things to note is that this use isn't allowed as of right. You can't just go in and get a permit and open it up. You have to go through this process that we're here for tonight of a conditional use to show that you've selected the appropriate location, that you put the appropriate design considerations and safety considerations in place, and that you're not creating any new impacts on the city. Next slide, please. Here's a slide showing you the location. We would occupy approximately 40,000 square feet of the existing building. It would be a 2-story use that will be on the north end of the existing building. Next slide, please. And here's the zoning map showing you the I3 and the overlay district, which is the corridor mixed use overlay district indicated by the hatching. Next slide, please. Here's the first floor plan for the entirety of the building. So the area in yellow is the area that the armory will occupy. Next slide, please. This shows the parking area. Next slide. This is the exterior of the building. Next slide. Okay, and this is our first floor plan. So the site is designed as a fully enclosed, securitized, and climate-controlled facility. It's been meticulously engineered to meet sound dampening standards and make sure that no sounds will disturb other tenants or be heard outside of the building. It will limit access to only pre-approved members of the public, as well as federal, state, and local law enforcement officers. We're anticipating that we'll be serving other agencies that include the state special operations personnel and Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And we will be running training exercises there through FDLE and through the special ops to train Opa-locka police officers and other local South Florida police and law enforcement officers. Next slide, please. This will walk you through the site plan. So these are the lanes where the shooting range is a static shooting range where you stand in one place and aim at a target. That will occupy a large portion of that upper part that you see that the orange arrow is coming from. There will be 10 lanes. Next slide. And then we'll have a more of a dynamic training area where you'll be able to move through a course and practice and train with various movable and dynamic objects to help, the real life interaction of what happens during a law enforcement event. Next slide. Same here, you have more simulation type of uses where, we can put on screens that make you feel like you're in a different place and create obstacles and other activities that will allow for better training. Next slide. Then on the lower portion of the second floor, there's some meeting room space and office space. And most of the second floor, just to go back 1 second, is open. It's a double level height. So the gray areas are where there's actual uses and the white areas are what are open to the floor below. So you have, high ceilings and a lot of room for people to move and for area for props and other set design items that will help to make the tactical training more realistic. Next slide. This is our summary of our security plan, but the site will have restricted access, camera coverage throughout. There will be intrusion detection and response, an alarm system with controlled access and credentials for employees and authorized individuals, and remote monitoring for security in case something happens on site. There will be people off site monitoring and making sure that everything is secure. So the site has been designed to meet the unique tactical and educational requirements, standards and objectives of the FDLE, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, as well as the City of Opa-locka Police Department. And Chief Otley is here to speak on that if you have any questions for him. And we have committed to supporting the Opa-locka police personnel by offering training and support in any way they need. These are commitments that the applicant has made to foster a safer, more secure environment in our partnership with Opa-locka. And we hope that you will agree. And we're here to answer any questions that you have. And Kaj Larson is also here to talk to you a little bit about what his role is as the chief of the special ops.
Thank you, Tracy, and nice to see everybody again. In the words of my commanding officer, be brief, be bold, and be gone. So I'll just underscore a couple things that Tracy mentioned and put a finer point on some of them. The most important thing is that when we conceived of this idea, we had a hypothesis that there wasn't enough tactical training areas for local law enforcement and for FDLE compliant facilities. So that's why we started engaging in this process and designed the entire concept of the project the way we did. As part of the testing of that hypothesis, because we are a team of both words and deeds, we've actually already started that interactive training. So this is not a future promise on goods delivered. 2 weeks ago, we held TCCC, Trauma Combat Casualty Care training between my unit and the Opa-locka Police Department. So we had 17 officers from the unit here. We certified them all in trauma combat casualty care. I may have mentioned last time, this kind of training has increased survivability on the battlefield by over 40%. And we think that the city is safer and the officers themselves are safer for us having conducted the training last week. So that's the high note. The low note is that because we didn't have a facility like the one that we're proposing building, we were forced to use the Federal Reserve range. That's only a 3-lane range, and the training value was somewhat compromised. Like everything else, semper gumby, always flexible. We made it work, but the ideal scenario is that we would have a tactical environment like the one that you saw described earlier, so that we could get the utmost training value for our local law enforcement. But I just wanted to underscore, as I said before, we are completely committed to that partnership. We've actually already begun it. It's in motion regardless. One other thing that I would put a finer point on is the third slide that you saw. If you could back up a little bit. Forward, sorry. The third floor plan slide. Next, one more. Yep, that one. So this is actually really unique within the tactical training environment. There is a lot of techniques, training, technology, and procedures that haven't actually migrated sufficiently to local law enforcement. One of these is this. This is a full digital theater simulated environment, and those are actually 270-degree screens with different training scenarios and environments. So this is a really effective way to simulate as close to real world as possible the kind of interactive environments that officers might encounter on the streets, and much better to train and fail in this environment so that you can be more effective on the streets. With that being said, I'll open it up if there's any questions, or if there's anything further I can clarify.
Any questions?
Yes, I have a question, but I guess it would be probably to the developer or whoever is going to build. If somebody can, I just wanted to know, because I noticed that this is at the Atlantic Hosiery Outlet, right? That's the property? Okay. How long is it gonna take before it's up and running? Like,
That's a good question. I'm going to leave that to my partner, Eric, but thank everybody for your time and attention.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Thank you for the question. Eric Greenwald, 5313 Lagorce Drive, Miami Beach, 33140. The answer to your question is that we're moving as quickly as possible, precisely in part because of the deficit that departments such as the chiefs have with regard to training facilities. While it is in the building that's currently called Atlantic Hosiery, that's actually the landlord, and they are moving those operations out of that building. We are in a segregated 40,000 square foot part of that building. It will not interact with the rest of the building, which is obviously important given our use, safety considerations, noise attenuation, things like that. The intention is, first of all, we obviously can't break ground on the build out until we complete the rezoning process and the special use process. But our intention is to break ground late summer and to be open in Q1 2025. It's an aggressive schedule, but the city I'd be remiss if I didn't say that the city has been tremendous in assisting us in moving things along as expeditiously as possible while still following process. So we have our project architect here, Mr. Scavuzzo, and his team has been working feverishly on our plans. We're up to 30% plans. They go in different iterations, but our expectation is that we're going to be in a position to start building out the improvements late summer. We've selected a range partner who they build and transport and stand up all of the range equipment. The fixed ranges that you saw in the dynamic range and the tactical room, they do all of that off-site and then bring it in and install it. So that's one important factor. And then we do the rest of the build out with our general contractor. So hopefully Q1 2025, that's certainly our intention.
So you're not gonna take the whole building. I'm just concerned about the vendors that are there. Because, they were moved from the Opa-locka flea market to this place here, so it's not gonna affect those vendors, right? They're not gonna be displaced or move out.
So
to someone else.
100% it will not affect those vendors. The landlord, Mr. Whitebook, he's committed to keeping the flea market there. It will not be displaced in any way, and there also won't be any cross contamination, for lack of a better term. We're going to have separate parking that's going to be, it's actually going to be fenced off because we want to, we're taking every precaution that we can to keep this completely secure and separate. Mr. Whitebook's office is there as well on the second floor, but the flea market will stay in its current location and it won't be affected in any way. And Mr. Whitebook would have been here but for a conflict, but he can speak to that as well. We're very conscious as to, I've been in Opa-locka, just so you know, working here since 2008 at the Opa-locka Executive Airport. I developed about 220 acres at the airport. So I've been a person in the community for an extended period of time. I know when the flea market closed, the outdoor flea market, and I know what Mr. Whitebook did to help keep the flame alive. He's committed to that and nothing's going to change.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Any other questions?
I just want to clarify the City of Opa-locka officers would be able to use that facility for training.
Correct.
Okay. But it's also for outside.
Membership based.
Okay, membership based.
Correct. We're not looking to do something that's going to be just for non-members. It's going to be for law enforcement and membership based. We're doing this very intentionally. It's sized in a certain way. We're going to have very high-end amenities, and so we need to limit the traffic we have coming through. But it will absolutely, be designed and made available to law enforcement, and specifically, and Chief Otley can speak to this, but specifically for training, they not only lack I'll let Chief Otley speak to it, but I think we hope this will solve a lot of issues or challenges, I should say, that the police force has. And one other thing to mention is another partner of ours with the Community Police Foundation. We are, as part of our commitment, when we sat with Chief Otley and talked about what the police force's needs were, it was bicycle patrols. And tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., our partner is doing a ceremony to donate 5 specialized bicycles that are specifically for law enforcement use to the chief and his team, so he can talk about that. But it's another part of, we're not just talking, we're doing, even before we're open, before we even have the approvals, before we've gotten really anywhere. We want to be a good community partner.
Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe if the chief can say a few words quickly.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, Board. So we have been working with the Armory Group for quite some time, and our training constraints have forced us to utilize the Miami-Dade Police Training Bureau, which at a cost of $1,500 per day severely limits and hampers our ability to effectively train our officers. As you spoke yesterday, last week, we used the Federal Reserve building, which has space limitations. So it took us a week to train all of our officers, whereby in a newer facility, a more advanced facility with advanced technology, would be able to run our entire city agency through in a couple of days versus 5 days. So the partnership with CPR and the Armory Group is a tremendous opportunity for us. Tomorrow we have 5 brand new patrol bikes that is going to increase our community policing and our ability to patrol the city at a level that my vision and the vision of the city manager is, and the commission, quite frankly, to put more officers on the street, more visible officers, to allow the city to see us doing what we're supposed to be doing. So I think this partnership for us is a great win, and I think it's gonna be a win for the city as well, and other local law enforcement sister agencies as well, because it'll be open to them as well. North Miami, Miami Gardens. So it's a win-win for the entire law enforcement community here in the north end of Miami-Dade County. Questions?
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, board members, we're going to have a brief presentation by our zoning official, Mr. Gerald Lee.
Gerald Lee, Planning and Community Development Department. As it relates to this particular use, they have already covered the development parts. The development parts of making this happen. I wanted to go over the things that are going to be related to the zoning code. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Of course, you know that as Mr. Gay said, the previous legislation that was reviewed at the last planning meeting was to adopt code to allow this use to even make it possible. And this is the review of a conditional use application for an actual location to do what that previous amendment would provide. Specifically about the location of where this armory shooting range is, when you look at the flea market site, as they so clearly tried to convey, the major building where the flea market is still the place where the flea market will be, but at the rear near the gas station closer to 135th Street is a separate building, and that building is where this new use is going to be. So that's where they'll redevelop, but you will make a recommendation, hopefully, to allow the conditional use to be at that site. The approval for the conditional use is only for the renovation of the interior of the building. What's special about that is they're not asking to build a new building to make this happen. They're going to retrofit the building that's already there. And they've already explained about the kind of things that are going to be there, the tactical things, the state-of-the-art shooting range, and so on and so forth. And it's going to enhance and improve and better prepare our police force, in addition to local law enforcement on many different levels for this area. So we look forward to seeing that. Next slide. Next slide. That's the location. Everybody knows it. Like I told you, it's the building to the south, to the northeast on that property site, and that's where that is. Next slide, please. I wanted to make you aware that this particular site is zoned I3, but the properties around it, there are some commercial pieces, a B2, a B3 zoning district. There's residential in the distance, but the majority of the area is all industrial, just like this site. So it is compatible with the area. Next slide, please. So as it relates to conditional use, these are the criteria that must be surpassed to be able to say that this is a good idea. First of all, it has to be in compliance with the city's comprehensive plan. It has to be consistent with the character and purpose of the zoning district. The size, shape, and character of the property are suitable for the proposed use. Compatibility with the existing uses near the property. It will not adversely affect the development of the general neighborhood or the district. It will not generate vehicular traffic or create vehicular circulation or ingress egress problems or parking demands that have an unfavorable impact on surrounding properties when compared with uses permitted by right in the same district. And I would add, there are some parking requirements that we have for this site, and they are going to be complied with, and that is still true. Next slide, please. The potential for fire and or other equally or greater dangerous hazards. It's not going to create an unfavorable environmental impact on surrounding uses, specifically for noise, glare, smoke, dust, odor, fumes, water pollution, or general nuisance. Okay, it's consistent with the existing and planned pedestrian and vehicular circulation adjacent to and near the property. The site is adequately served by essential public services and facilities not requiring additional public expense and infrastructure improvements. The site will not adversely affect any site or feature of historic, cultural, natural, or scenic importance. And 12, will not be contrary to the public health, safety, and welfare, provided that denial based exclusively on this language shall include explicit findings regarding the way in which granting the special exception would be contrary to the public health, safety, and welfare. Next slide, please. So here, this is the converse. This is to answer those things. The development, if approved, would be in compliance with the city's comprehensive plan. It would be consistent with the character and purpose of the zoning district. The size, shape, and character of the property are suited for the proposed use. It would be compatible with the existing uses near and adjacent to the property. It would not adversely affect the development of the general neighborhood or district. It would not generate vehicular traffic or create vehicular circulation or ingress egress problems that would have an unfavorable impact on surrounding properties when compared with uses permitted by right in the same district, given the size of the property. Next slide, please. The development, if approved, no, back up, yeah. The development, if approved, would not increase the potential for fire and or other equally or greater dangerous hazards, would not create an unfavorable environment, impacts on surrounding uses, including noise, glare, smoke, dust, odor, fumes, water pollution, or general nuisance. Also, this would be consistent with the existing and planned pedestrian and vehicular circulation adjacent to and near the property. Next slide. Staff recommends approval. It meets all the requirements and the benchmarks of the conditional use requirements for this particular conditional use at this location. The area is industrial in nature. The fact that they're doing what they're doing inside a wholly enclosed building is similar to and comparable to all the other industrial warehouse uses that are in the area that are also within a wholly enclosed building. So this is not a change from any of that. And anything that is near it is still industrial and like-minded of the same sort, okay? That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any questions for staff? We'll open a public hearing. Anybody for? Public hearing closed. Can we get a motion on item number 1?
Move it.
Oh, yes, make the motion. Second.
Roll call?
Board Member Hibbert Smith,
Yes.
Board Member Dominguez,
Yes.
Board Member Mata,
Yes.
Chairman Guerrero.
Yes.
Item passed.
We get item number 2.
A resolution of the City Commission of the City of Opa-locka, Florida, providing approval of the special exception request to operate a car dealership on the property located at 2695 Northwest 141st Street and identified by folios 08-2122 000-0120 in the Commercial Liberal B2 zoning district and within the corridor mixed-use overlay, providing for severability, providing for an effective date.
Thank you.
Okay, board members, I'd just like to give you a little brief synopsis of this particular property. This property is just on the northern edge of State Road 9, where State Road 9 and 27th Avenue actually meet on the northbound portion of it. The history of this property is that it's been utilized for several different automotive and truck parking related uses. Some of them have been without having proper licensure or certifications for those activities to take place. Our staff has been working very closely with the property owners for a number of years, and we've gotten them to the point where, based on the code that we have today, they can basically go through a process where they can be legalized to operate through that particular process. So I was hoping that someone representing the property would be here this evening. Unfortunately, they're not. But Mr. Lee can give you a synopsis, at least from the staff's perspective, of the things that we've been going through with this particular property owner to basically have them to come in conformance with what our zoning code allows. So Mr. Lee will make a presentation.
Okay. Can you pull the presentation up again? Go forward. Okay, next slide. Okay, Gerald Lee, Planning and Community Development Department. This is a request for a special exception review for a car dealership. This property has been challenged, as Mr. Gay alluded to. Oftentimes, it was a source of violations, people trying to sell cars without a license, people doing repairs without a license. That it was a problem site. We did, after looking at the research, find that there are a couple of uses that are licensed, but the secondary or tertiary applications that were there were unlicensed, and they kept becoming car dealerships. And finally, this person who is making this request and presenting this request to you complied with the requirements of the code by trying to get a special exception to have their dealership approved. They're not using the entire site because there are two other uses. I think a tire hauling business and a trailer storage. So that's in one section, but in another section is where she's selling a small quantity of cars. No repair work is going to be done, but she'll have a license to sell cars to the public. And that's why she's coming to have you consider a special exception review and approval for her to have a dealership. Next slide, please. As Mr. Gay said, that's the location of the property. If you look at it, you can see where State Road 9 bends to the right and goes east. And then to your left is 27th Avenue, Broward University. Yeah, 27th Avenue on the west side, but that property is just to the west of the school. See that big open lot? Mm-hmm. That big open lot is a part of the school's property, and then it's the school and the little apartment building. That property is directly next to two other commercial uses to the north and commercial uses to the south. So that whole zoning area is commercial except for the school in that area. Okay. So next slide, please. This is the zoning for the location. The blue is civic. That's where the school location is. That little brown section inside of the blue, That's where the apartments are. And this particular use is adjacent to the red and just north of the yellow. The yellow is residential, single family, and everything around it is commercial. And that whole corridor right along Service Road is commercial. Next slide, please.
So what's the zoning for this particular property?
B2.
Oh, it's part of the B2.
Yes, sir. It's B2. It's B2 and the ones around it are B2 except for the school. Okay, and the residential to the south, but almost everything is red around this area. That's all B2. Okay. As we did with the previous application, this is the conditional use review criteria, that it's in compliance with the city's comprehensive plan, that is consistent with the character and purpose of the zoning district, that the size, shape, and character of the property are suited for the proposed use, compatibility with the existing uses near the property, will not adversely affect the development of the general neighborhood or district, will not generate vehicular traffic, or create vehicular circulation or ingress-egress problems or parking demands that have an unfavorable impact on surrounding properties when compared with uses permitted by right in the same district. I'm going to stop there. This might be one that you would want to look at, but because the dealership that they're proposing is not to fill that whole property, it's only to do a section. So when customers come, there will be room for them to drive in, take a look at the car, do what they need to do. If they like it, then they can buy it. If they don't, they can leave it, but there won't be a congestion problem for in and out to sell cars. Next slide, please. Potential for fire and or equally or greater dangerous hazards create an unfavorable environment impacts on surrounding uses. For example, noise, glare, smoke, dust, odor, fumes, water pollution, or general nuisance, consistent with existing and planned pedestrian and vehicular circulation adjacent to and near the property. Site is adequately served by essential public services and facilities not requiring additional public expense and infrastructure improvements. Just a note here, this is a built environment. They already have an office structure on the property. It's already connected to water and sewer. They're already operating a business there. So this new use won't require any new construction, only probably the installation of some trees or bushes to make it comply with landscaping, and maybe some striping for the cars that they'll have for their dealership, so they can, show where they're responsible. Will not adversely affect any site or feature of historical, cultural, natural, or scenic importance. Will not be contrary to the public health, safety, welfare, provided that denial based exclusively on this language shall include explicit findings regarding the way in which granting the special exception would be contrary to the public health, safety, and welfare. Next slide, please. So the development, if approved, would be in compliance with the city's comprehensive plan, would be consistent with the character and purpose of the zoning district. The size, shape, and character of the property are suited for the proposed use, would be compatible with the existing uses near and adjacent to the property, would not adversely affect the development of the general neighborhood or district, would not generate vehicular traffic or create vehicular circulation or ingress-egress problems that would have unfavorable impact on surrounding properties when compared with uses permitted by right in the same district given the size of the property. Next slide. Would not increase the potential for fire and or other equally or greater dangerous hazards, would not create any unfavorable environmental impacts on surrounding uses, including noise, glare, smoke, dust, odor, fumes, water pollution, or general nuisance, and would be consistent with the existing and planned pedestrian and vehicular circulation adjacent to and near the property. Staff recommends approval because it meets the criteria of the special exception requirements, because in our code, special exceptions and conditional uses have pretty much the same standards. That's why it sounds exactly like the conditional use that we just reviewed. That's all I have.
Are the other uses in the property, have they been, are they operating legally now or?
Yes, sir. They have licensure. I rechecked again, just this week. And they have licenses that are good through September 30th, 2024.
And the car dealerships are allowed in a B2 or that's why we're?
Yes,
here?
sir. It's allowed in the B2 by special exception, and that's why we're here.
Okay.
Because even though many times over the years, people were trying to sell cars from there, nobody ever had a license. This is going to be the first.
And obviously they'd get DMV approval. All that.
Of course.
Yeah, okay.
Of course.
Any other questions?
Yeah, you took my question.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask the same thing regarding the other property. So, okay, so you're saying that they're now in compliance, because I know in the past that they had issues with code enforcement and issues
Yes, ma'am.
in the past. So I don't know, I'm just a bit confused. How were they able to be there and sell cars? And they didn't have a permit, or it was other people that were selling or doing something
Yes, ma'am.
rather?
I liken it to the phrase, just do it.
Mhm.
Sometimes people just make a deal with a property owner. They pay them to be there. They start a business. They don't come to the city for a license. And they just do it. And then one day, code drives by and says, hey, let me see your license. And then they don't have one. Then it becomes a cat and mouse game.
But I
Catch
think at
them
the
or not.
time that that person had a license, it was the other people that were, I guess, subleasing the sections.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
that's what the confusion was, but if they've been there, I don't see an issue with it.
That's wonderful.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lee. So we'll open a public hearing for this item. Close public hearing. Can we get a motion?
A motion to,
Motion to approve.
I second.
Paul?
Board Member Hibbert Smith,
Yes.
Board Member Dominguez,
yes,
Board Member Mata,
Yes.
Chairman Guerrero.
Yes.
Item passed.
Good, item number 3.
An ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Opa-locka, Florida, creating a new Article 11 of the City Code of Ordinances, renumbering the following sections, specifically adopting certain provisions of Senate Bill 102, the Live Local Act relating to affordable housing, providing for the administrative approval of certain qualified projects containing affordable housing units, authorizing the city manager to take certain actions, providing for incorporation of recitals, providing for conflict, providing for severability, providing for an effective date.
Thank you.
Chair, members of the board, Gregory Gay. This is legislation that has been, in essence, required for us to look at in some way, shape, or form. The Florida State Legislature, about a year and a half ago, passed new legislation, basically trying to shorten the timeline for building new housing or mixed-use development. With that particular legislation, which was called SB 102, the Live Local Act, what it in essence was to do is to shorten that time period for projects that were going to be built in areas that were not residential. They may have been commercial, they may have been mixed use, and even industrial. But if a property owner at that time wanted to do residential development or mixed use development in those particular locations, they will be able to go through an accelerated process. In some cases, that accelerated process would not include local boards or local commissions to take action. It was passed and it was mandated to be legislation that local municipalities have to address in some way, shape, or form. This is our attempt to address those particular legislation. We've been going back and forth and trying to modify this particular legislation for about a little over a year now, since the legislation passed last year. Matter of fact, they made a modification to their legislation just recently, and that was approved, I believe, in March or April of this year. So we tried to react to that modification as well. Mr. Lee's going to make a presentation as it relates to the Live Local Act. We would like for you to take this information into consideration. It does have somewhat of an impact as it relates to your board as well as the city commission. But like I said, the purpose of it is to accelerate the development process for creating opportunities for more affordable housing and more mixed-use development to occur. This is not just something that's being done in Opa-locka. It is happening throughout every municipality in the state of Florida. Mr. Lee can make his presentation.
Okay. Gerald Lee, Planning and Community Development Department. As Mr. Gay has explained, this is already state law. And so each city has to make their inroads of how they're going to adopt and support what they have to deal with anyway. Okay. And as he said, this is to reduce the time for development so that a developer doesn't have to come to a board, have a review, and then take it to the commission, and then have a review, and then build their project, because that builds in 6 to 9 months on their development time. And if they've got a bank note to take care of, that's what they're trying to reduce so that affordable housing can be built in a more expeditious time period. That's what I understand that this is supposed to do. So let me begin here. Next slide, please. The Live Local Act is to change local governments' land development codes. Okay, how local governments can treat certain proposed affordable housing projects or developments. For one, it won't allow local governments to provide rent controls. It removes that ability from cities to control rents. It provides development incentives, like it can make a multifamily or mixed-use residential development allowable uses in areas that are zoned, as Mr. Gay said, in commercial areas, in mixed-use areas, but also in industrial areas. Okay, it doesn't just allow them to do the development. It requires that if they do the development, it has to include 40% of the project to be an affordable project. So they have reduced rents, reduced rate. I mean, it's for people who have lower incomes to be able to get housing. 40% of that project has to be for low income persons. Also, this legislation takes away the city's ability to require a zoning change, a land use change, special exception or conditional use changes for residential housing. All this is about residential housing. It takes away the ability for them to require variances. It takes away their ability to do comprehensive development master plan amendments for building heights or increased densities. Next slide, please. It also requires that mixed use residential affordable developments have to have at least 65% of the total square footage of their project dedicated for residential purposes. So you can't claim that you're doing an affordable project and less than that percent is on residential. So they hold the feet to the fire that this is supposed to help people of low income get housing. It also prohibits local governments from restricting density numbers below the highest allowed density in any land under its jurisdiction. So if under this act, if a developer wanted to build a project and the zoning of that property would reduce how much the density would be, this act gives that developer the opportunity to look at the highest density in the city and make that project what that is. It also does the same with building heights. So if you're in a zoning district that restricts your building height to 4 stories, but the city's highest approved level for building heights is, let's say, 8 stories, then you can do an 8-story highest density building at the location that you're at, irregardless to what the zoning requires. Okay. It also requires that local governments consider parking reductions for affordable projects, as long as that development is within a half mile from a major transit stop, which is accessible from that development. Next slide, please. Oh, you're on there. Requires those municipalities that designate fewer than 20% of their land area for commercial or industrial uses. It authorize a proposed mixed-use residential affordable multifamily housing project in areas zoned for commercial or industrial use. In other words, when you have a city like, let's say if Opa-locka was all residential and very little commercial and industrial, it would allow them to build more in commercial and industrial districts, since that's where you have the lowest composition. Another thing is it removes zoning decision-making authority from the local government's boards by requiring that affordable multi-family housing developments be administratively approved if the development complies with these regulations that have been stated, that it's within the 40% for affordable, that it's in the district that they said, that the heights that they're proposing are the heights that are the highest in the city, that the density that they're going after is the highest in the city. If they comply with everything that this bill, SB 102, provides, the Live Local Act, then they can do their review and approvals administratively and not go to a board, not go to the commission, and start pulling their permits. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it. Local government administration requires local governments to list, it tells the government that you need to provide to the public any properties that you have that could be used for affordable housing and put it on your website. So any developer that wants to know can go to your website and see what's available. It also encourages tax abatement or tax lessening for ad valorem taxes and for cities to adopt legislation that takes into consideration charitable use properties or properties that are going to be used by lower income people and reduce your taxes in some formula based on that. Whew. Being that this is a state bill, a state bill that we have
State law.
a state law that we have little impetus, consideration, we are presenting what we must for approval. Staff recommends approval, right? Mhm.
I have a question. What was their motivation from changing the bill in the first place?
Want to take that?
I'll attempt to take that one. Basically, it was, well, when the SB 102 was initially done, it was basically to remove government from the review process, especially if the developers were looking to do something in commercial or industrial areas. And it was to accelerate the opportunities to develop affordable housing. Opa-locka we already had some legislation that was within our code. We do have a mixed use overlay that's over a majority of our commercial areas, over some of our residential areas as well. And it does dip into some of the industrial areas. We already had made an attempt to do that, but it basically said, in addition to that, giving developers an opportunity by right to go forth and get projects done without going through a municipal approval process. Now, since
People would just turn it off.
I think it was me. Okay. Now, since that time, they did make some modifications to the law, some amendments. They made some modifications to the laws. I'm not sure of all of the modifications that they made. Some were dealing with parking requirements, some were dealing with height requirements and FAA requirements due to the fact that we have an airport that is immediately adjacent to the city, and the densities that are adjacent to the airport are relatively liberal in a sense. And we've actually had communications with the FAA at looking at opportunities to increase the height limitations based on what would be allowable by FAA requirements. So we had already begun that particular conversation. But it's in essence to basically look at it as an opportunity to bypass local government opportunities to review a project and make modifications to it to make it much more suitable for that municipality and to allow for developers to move forward. Now, it is also, there are some, along with the incentives, there's a funding source through the Florida Housing Finance Corporation that is built up a treasure trove of funding. These particular projects can apply for that particular funding. In the past, they only funded maybe once a year. Now they're funding 3 to 4 times a year for projects that are ready to be moved forth. So this is basically the state government taking an aggressive stance to say, we need housing, we need more affordable housing. Let's find a way to make it a little bit easier for developers to get that housing in the ground so that people will have a place to stay.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so you get a motion?
Move it.
Second,
Audience seconds.
roll call.
Board Member Hibbert Smith,
Approve.
Board Member Dominguez,
Yes.
Board Member Mata,
Yes.
Chairman Guerrero.
Yes.
Item passed.
Okay. There anything else?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I believe that pretty much exhausts our agenda for this evening.
And you're sad.
All right. Planning and zoning meeting for June 4th is closed.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.